Good evening and welcome to VicVotes, our coverage of the state election produced by RMITV and the Journalism Society. I'm Lachlan Patrick.
And I'm Lily Cristanto. Wominjeka would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which the university stands.
RMIT University respectfully recognises elders past, present and emerging. Before we get started, be sure to follow our behind-the-scenes coverage on social media at RMIT JSOC and RMITV. Those handles are on your screens now.
You can also tweet along with us using the VicVotes RMITV hashtag. So Lachlan, how are you feeling about tonight?
I'm feeling great. Polls have just closed, so if you're still in line, stay in line. But we have such a great show in store. We've sent people everywhere. You've been to Frankston, Ollie's been to Monbulk, Emerald. We've got people everywhere. So how are you feeling?
Yeah, good. But that is right. We've sent people all over Melbourne. Coming up, learn what's happening with the big election issues that matter to you and stay up to date with the results as they come in.
Yes, that's right. I'm here in RMITV's virtual studios to break down all the numbers as they trickle in. I'll be taking you through the state of play a little later on, and we'll have a look at some of the closest races before the results start coming in. Before all that though, let's check in with our team around Melbourne tonight. Oliver is in the southeast, Natalie is in the north, and Sophia is in the heart of Melbourne in the CBD. So Oliver, where are you tonight?
I'm here in Brighton. It's a warm night in Elwood. I'm just at the Scout Hall here. It's a new voting booth, so it's a bit quiet, but they're also packing up at the moment, so that's perhaps another reason why. Now, Brighton, it's an original seat. It's been around since 1856. It's also a Liberal-dominated seat, and I think the Labor candidates around here seem pretty confident, though, that might change this time around. Liberal only hold on by about a 1% voting margin, so the Labor candidates definitely seem much more confident today. I spoke to the Green candidates as well, and they definitely think they've got a chance at taking over this electorate. This new voting hall here, it's not as representative of the rest of Brighton. It's definitely more Labor-leaning, left-leaning area, not as Liberal-dominated as it would seem to be. But I think despite that, I reckon the Greens and the Labor candidates definitely reckon that they've got a chance at taking over for this electorate, this state election. It'll be a history first, and considering how Liberal-dominated this electorate has been, it'll definitely be a big victory for Labor if they win, or the Greens if they win as well. That's yeah. I just got to.
Great, thank you very much, Ollie. We're going to cross over to Sophia now in the CBD. Sophia, who have you been talking to tonight?
Hi there, I'm at the Islamic Council of Victoria here in West Melbourne. So the Islamic Council of Victoria represents about 270,000 Muslim people here in Victoria. And they run a grassroots program called My Vote Matters, which is a great program that helps Muslim people in the Victorian community to be more educated and make a more informed vote, as many of them haven't voted in Australia before or in Victoria before. And also it helps to encourage more voting activity from the Muslim community. So earlier in the week, I had the privilege of going to the Virgin Mary Mosque in Hoppers Crossing. And I was welcomed by Bakr Hawari and his father, who is the Imam of the mosque. And they ran a prayer and speech to the Muslim community there to, again, help educate them. And they are part of the My Vote Matters grassroots program that is run through the Islamic Council. So, yes, I had the privilege of speaking to members of the community there, as well as the Imam, about issues that concern them and the Muslim community. Thanks.
Bahami Bakr is giving a speech to the Muslim community of Hoppers Crossing. He's helping the community to understand how to vote and the importance of voting in this year's Victorian election. Did you vote in the last election?
No, I'm not the citizen yet, but but my family yet. Yeah.
We have been supporting actively to Labour. We have migrants, and we think like Labour is a pro-migrant party. So we believe like they encourage multiculturalism and religious values and cultural values.
I prefer Labour for our children to give them more options in Victoria.
عرفوا بدعمهم المطلق لإسرائيل وأحيانا بعض المواقف العنصرية ضد المسلمين.
I voted for Liberals last time. I'm actually a Labor voter, but I voted for Liberals for the change. You know, looking at the smaller businesses. And then I thought, well, maybe it's time for a change. With Labor that's already in today, there's a lot of things that's got to be fixed, but at least they're making good mark. This does not surprise me that most of us out here would be for Labor Party. Why is that? Because we're workers. We're in factories. We're in retail. We're nurses. So this does not surprise me whatsoever that we would vote for Labor.
How could we help more people to understand how the system
To more integrate with the Muslim community. So once they will start integrating with the community, so of course they will teach them, they will understand the community will understand the government. So this is how they integrate with each other.
Look, as a migrant, we want our say and we want our presence. That is more important. We don't want to be neglected. We want our presence in every industry, every aspects.
Some interesting perspectives there. Now, I'm here with Baka Houari. That was your mosque.
Yes, that's the Jumeirah Mosque in Melbourne's west, Lachlan.
Absolutely. So I guess you've been really building a community there recently. What's been going on?
Heaps of things have been going on. I mean, our electorate is one of the fastest growing electorates, I would say. The Muslim community is largely growing with about 5 mosques there right now, other than the little pockets and community centres where people are praying. So it's a real community hub.
Yeah, sure. So I guess with the fastest growing mosque, I guess has lots of new faces. So how are you part of, I guess, welcoming those new faces really to the mosque?
Certainly. There's our mosque is one of the most multicultural mosques in Victoria, with over 30 nationalities, and that's what's becoming over all the mosques in Victoria, because Muslims are coming from every part of the world. A lot of people think that Muslims are only from the Middle East. There's Muslims that are coming from Africa, from Asia, from Indonesia, those places as well, and then as well as the Middle East, Arabia. So even Muslims in Europe are coming. So it's much broader than we think, and they're all coming in around certain values and have a consensus around certain values.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about those values in just a moment, because you're supporting, I guess, a campaign and an initiative called My Vote Matters. Can you tell me a little bit about that? My
Vote Matters is an initiative. It's a grassroots campaign by the Islamic Council of Victoria, the peak body representing Muslim societies and organisations in Victoria. They aim to make Muslims vote based on an informed decision. They don't tell you they're bipartisan. They don't tell you vote this way. They don't tell you vote that way. They're not like a political thing per se, but they're advocating for Muslims to vote. They're advocating for Muslims to vote an informed decision, and they have a scorecard which is available. And the scorecard tells you, for this certain party, they're covering this area. They're partially addressing it, they're addressing it, or they're not addressing it. Now, how I like to look at it, that scorecard kind of tells you, all right, and that scorecard, I think, is very important to mention, Lachlan. It covers all things that the average Tom, Dick and Harry are worried about as well. So it's not like the Muslim community is some isolated community that's, has completely separate issues. A lot of them are working class, a lot of them are small business owners, a lot of them are doctors. So they're concerned about, the average things that every Australian is worried about: the rising cost of living, home, education, the infrastructure. And I'd say there are distinct things that are for the Muslim community, but I would say certainly the Muslim community leaders, part of that is the My Vote Matters, and every single have been asking their community to make an informed decision at our mosque. As you probably saw before, we're asking people to be part, to elect and to participate based on their values. I mean, we're not bringing religion into politics here, but because Australia is a secular state. But what we're saying is, if everybody's meant to vote according to their values, then we're voting according to our values, which are based off our religion.
Absolutely, and so that's where the scorecard comes in. I guess you're non-partisan, obviously, but are there any parties that are tending to come top of the class on those scorecards?
Look, the scorecard does not cover every single party because that's near impossible.
Absolutely. So many
covers,
now, right?
Yes, heaps of parties all over. But it covers the major three or the major two and the third, which are the Labor, the Liberal and the Greens. And it has those, as I said, it says, okay, this issue addresses, partially addresses, or does not address. And what I like to tell people is don't look at it in terms of quantity, but look in terms of what's on there and see what's the most important to you, what's your priority, and vote based on that. In Islam, actually, part of our values, and I've tried and I've advocated personally for people to vote based on that, we have something called the 5 necessities. So those are something that, as a Muslim, you should always aim to maintain, and that is your life, as a human, your religion, as well as your wealth. So what's better so in election it would be what's better for the community and what's better for the person as well as the mind and how it's how it stays stable, as well as the final thing would be family. Family is very important, and that's certainly, I'll come to that, it's creating a change and a shift in the way the Muslim community is voting, their views on family, and I guess the evolution that's happening, that their views are obviously conservative views, and that is changing the way Muslims vote.
Absolutely. Now, there are some priorities we were just discussing off air in, I guess, issues of particular importance to the Muslim community. So there's been a bit made this campaign about religious discrimination and possible legislation there. What's the sentiment kind of in your community?
Look, the sentiment, as people probably saw in the video before, people, as I said, the Muslim community has all the concerns that everyone else has. Some of them are working class and they're voting accordingly. Some of them are small business owners and they're voting accordingly, more to the Liberals, the others. But there's 2 matters that I would focus on. Religious freedoms, also the parents and their rights, and the way family is, and the way we interpret family. That's really concerning Muslim votes. And I would say traditionally, I would comfortably say the Muslims have generally voted for the Labor Party because they saw, especially after 9/11, they needed an ally in the left who promotes multiculturalism and so on. Now there's a big shift where we see the Labor Party is making a lot of laws that don't comply with those values. The Muslim community is a multicultural community.
We're starting to see some swing voters, really.
Yes, certainly, towards, I would say, the Liberal Party or independents, or away from the Labor Party or the Greens, who, yes, advocate multiculturalism, who advocate diversity, who worked a lot with before, but what we're seeing now is people are concerned about laws like the Equal Opportunity Act, where people in the Muslim community want to make sure that they can teach their values in religious schools, in Muslim schools, obviously without preaching hatred or anything like that. They want to make sure we choose who teaches our kids. They want to make sure there's even bills that are, are promised to be passed on Daniel Andrews' government, which say, a mature minor can change or transition their gender if they seem mature without parental consent. So that creates a lot of, backlash in the Muslim community.
A bit controversial, for sure. Yeah, no, I want to come back to, I guess, hatred, because we were talking also off air about Islamophobia and hate crimes, which are obviously a very really big concern for you. Just very briefly, because we are running out of time. Tell me a little bit about that.
So racism and Islamophobia is the other thing I was going to get to. And yes, certainly it is a concern for the Muslim community, especially vulnerable Muslim women. They're very visible, they're wearing the hijab, they're going out there, they're trying to participate in every part of society. And we have seen, and the statistics show, there's an Islamophobia register, you can go there and check it. There are, there's a lot of Islamophobia, way more than it should be. And this not only, as I want to say, not only affects Muslims, but it really affects the social cohesion of society, because we want Muslim men and women to participate. We want people from all parts and walks of life to participate in Australian society.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to participation, doesn't it?
Yes, participation, and as well as Muslims, we don't want to get lost in the left-right culture war. We want to go beyond that, because we have some progressive and we have some conservative values, so we're trying to walk that way, and I think people saw that in the video that we saw before.
Absolutely. Well, definitely, your vote matters, my vote matters, all our votes matter. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Let's check back in with Sophia.
Hi, so I'm in the CBD at the moment, where the weather is starting to turn. We had a nice sunny day before, but as the polls are getting closer and closer to giving us an answer, this weather is turning. There's not that many places in the CBD to vote, but earlier today I went and caught up. I went to Scott's Church, where there is a polling place. And we did some interviews with people in the street who had just been voting or who were planning to vote, and just asked about issues that were most important to them. It was pretty interesting to see. There was definitely a range of things, a range of opinions, but the general consensus seemed to be that people were concerned about climate issues, concerned about housing, and definitely there were some different opinions in terms of what had happened with the pandemic, but not everybody wanted to speak on that. So we were lucky as well to get a range of voices. So we had some younger people, some older people, some people that were handing out the how to vote cards, which was very interesting to hear, as a lot of those people are very politically involved. Yeah, it was really interesting just to get a bit of a vibe about how everybody's feeling and where we think tonight is going to go. But there's still a bit of time until then, so hoping that everyone can get in and make sure that they vote before then. And who really knows what is going to happen? It's going to be a very interesting evening, I think.
What would you like to see the elected government do? Like, what needs to be addressed the most with this issue?
Well, I think essentially housing, it's a basic need for everyone. So I think housing would be a really good start.
I think I came out for climate action mainly, and also housing affordability. I think that the Greens really support young people, and those are the kind of issues I feel like young people are interested in.
Definitely, I think one of the most important things is funding into public services such as hospitals and schools. My mum's a nurse, and I think more than anything, as much as it is great to be acknowledged and thanks, and she got lots of bloody gifts over the time, but there's not enough infrastructure, there's not enough funding into nursing and public hospitals.
Money is one, social causes, green causes, but infused in a common sense way, which seems to be lacking in politics.
Well, I think climate change and the environment is sort of the biggest issue of our generation.
Can you expand on that? What about climate change?
Well, I think that we've only got one planet to live on, and the issues around short-term political goals and sort of expediency there are sort of sacrificing bigger issues. That's forcing also cost of living issues and other things that affect everybody.
Well, I'm obviously here handing out for the Animal Justice Party, so we're interested in helping the world, but particularly through helping the world for animals, reducing animal cruelty, and also helping people and the environment at the same time.
And what do you think of the campaign for this election?
I'm really frustrated with it. It's just got really angry and nasty, and it's horrible to even watch, and I've turned off. I voted as soon as I could.
Some very compelling views there. While we wait for results to come in, let's take a look at how the parties have been polling.
You may have heard of some firms like Resolve, Newspoll, those big names, and what they do is they estimate voter sentiment by running polls throughout election campaigns and during political terms as well, so we can see how our leaders have been going.
As you can see, Labor won the last election with a pretty commanding margin, but that buffer has eroded during the pandemic.
And an emerging trend recently has been the rise of independent candidates and smaller parties. As we've seen federally there, they've, with the Teals and all that stuff, and so here even on a state level, they've actually doubled their share of the primary vote. So, yeah, it's a really big emerging trend there, definitely. There's a couple of independents running in Frankston, aren't there?
Yeah, there is. When I went to the polling booth the other night, I saw that there were 2 independents actually in Frankston.
Wow.
Yeah, and in my district, Labor has held the seat since 2014, but with these new independents, it'll be interesting to see how it stacks up.
Absolutely. I know there's one independent running in Caulfield, and I was speaking to her, Naomi, shout out if you're watching, and she was telling me how, because she was one of those Teal independents inspired by those women running federally, and she said the Teal colour is so popular now for independents, they'd run out of Teal signs, so she had to go with dark Teal.
Oh.
Yeah, there you go. So that's just how demanding independents are at the moment. But they're focusing on those single issues really, aren't they? Like kind of integrity and that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we've seen like stronger pushes with climate change from independent as well. Yeah. Really broad across the spectrum, I'd say.
Yeah, I think they're very good actually at finding kind of perhaps those places where the major parties are, the kind of the chinks in the armour. And they're really capitalising on those little bits.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
Definitely. Now, let's cross over to Freddie, who will explore how our leaders' seats are shaping up.
Polls closed about 20 minutes ago and they're tallying the votes as we speak. Unfortunately, there's nothing clear to get a grasp at right now. So in the meantime, let's have a look at how the 2018 election shaped up. So first up, we're going to have a look at the parliamentary structure following the 2018 election. We haven't got that graph up right now, but look, it's pretty, we all sort of know what's going on. There it is, we've got it there now. We all sort of know what happened. Labor clinched the majority with 55 seats after the election last year. Now, if you get the majority, it pretty much means you have won. Liberal followed on with 21 seats, the Nationals followed on with 6, Greens and Independents each got 3 seats each. Now let's move on to Mulgrave. This is Daniel Andrews' seat, our current Premier. This is a very safe Labor seat we've got here with a 15.8% margin, and this increased with the redistribution of the boundaries. Labor has held this seat since 2002. We're not expecting this to change too much today. Moving on to Matthew Guy's seat, the leader of the Liberal Party. This is the seat of Bulleen. This is a bit more marginal. We've got a 5.5% margin here. Matthew Guy's seat here. But the interesting thing about this one is that the two-party preferred for this seat has always been about 10% higher than the average two-party preferred for a Liberal seat in this state. So that's something to keep in mind here. We might not see this move too much tonight, but we will certainly be keeping an eye on it. Let's have a look at a few more marginal seats tonight. This is where things are going to get a bit interesting tonight. Right here, we've got the seat of Sandringham. This is a marginal Liberal seat by 0.4%. So they hold 0.4% of the votes over Labor. The Liberals have, Liberal has always held this except for 1982 to 1985 where the Labor was able to clinch it off them, and the two-party preferred has been narrowing for this seat in the past 2 elections. Finally, let's have a quick look at the seat of Brighton. This one was hit really hard by the redistribution of boundaries. It went from having a Liberal margin of 1.1% to just 0.5%, so over halved since the boundaries were redrawn, and the two-party preferred has sharply narrowed between the Liberal and the Labor in the past two elections. So this is something we're definitely going to keep an eye on here, and this will be one of the more interesting seats for the night. I'll keep you updated a little bit later, but in the meantime, we're going to head back to the desk with Lachlan and Lily.
Thanks for that, Freddie. Now, look, we've got an incredible show for you. Earlier, you saw the first 2 of our live reporters, and we're going to head out and see another one on the road right now. Or are we? The suspense continues. We might be having some technical issues. If you're just joining us, you're still watching VicVotes presented by RMITV and the Journalism Society. Now, some teething issues here, but we are hoping to get over to Zoom. I can hear them in my ear. Let's see if we can get them now.
I'm here in Northcote at the Baptist Church on High Street. The ALP has been in power for the majority of Northcote history, but now people are betting for the Greens to win, with lots of interest to independent parties like the Freedom Party, Family First, and Reason. It's sure to be interesting with a turnout for this election.
Let's practice sneaky swivel. It's going super well. There we go. We're live now. Can we believe we've been on air for half an hour already? I don't think we can. We don't believe we're on air now. There we go. There we go. Time just seems to fly by this election. It's just gone 6:30, which means, well, the polling place has been closed for a while, haven't they? I hope there's not anyone still in line.
No.
No, I mean, if they are, well, stay in line. Stay in line. Absolutely. So, look, what we're going to do is I think we might have a video for you. We might have a special report from Natalie, and we might be going to that right now. Let's see. Anything can happen here on
Melbourne's busiest laneways. It is hard to imagine these laneways that are the heart of Melbourne City were once ghost towns during the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns, which Melbourne endured the longest lockdowns around the world. So I'll take it to the streets to speak to some Victorians to see their thoughts on how the pandemic lockdowns are managed and maybe how that affects their vote.
Lynn, please tell me, what are your thoughts on the lockdowns that happened over 2020 and 2021?
Yeah, that were not good. We did get annoyed with them at the time, but I also think that we didn't have as many deaths in that time frame that we could have had.
So what are your thoughts on the lockdowns?
I'm glad it's over, but I think these people should not protest and go have a drink and enjoy their Saturday.
Almost every weekend, protesters have been gathering to Parliament steps to protest against the management of the lockdowns, against the mandatory requirements. We speak to people of Victoria on their thoughts of the protests and of the management of the protests.
Do you think the turnout of police is necessary for today?
No, it's somewhat more. I'm sorry for swearing, but it's somewhat. Like, come on, man, they bought like 3 buses. We got like over 20 people, over 50 at least. I don't understand this. Why? We're just humans. We're not humans. We've got a free fighter here, freedom fighter over here.
Do you think the response to today's protest is sufficient or over the top?
Over the top.
Do you think that's a good use of taxpayers' money for police to come out?
No.
Okay, is there anything else you'd like to add in regards to your views on how Melbourne has been managing the lockdowns and upcoming elections?
Yes, things have improved a lot, and I like all the things that are happening now. All the governments, both sides are doing very well, and yes, I'm very hopeful for the future.
Are you going to vote for in the upcoming election?
I will, but I must. If I don't, I get fined. But I will. But I'm not going to vote for these people. But I'll vote for my people.
Natalie Heslop, RMITV, Melbourne.
There we go.
You have a role or say in the upcoming election?
I don't know. We'll find out. Time will tell. I mean, obviously, you probably know I'm running in the Northern Metropolitan region for the Freedom Party, and I'm on the hustings as we speak. I'm about to go there after this, hence why I've got the Freedom Party gear on. And yeah, I'll be campaigning, and we'll see what role actually we will play.
What prompted you to join the Freedom Party?
Well, it's interesting. Is talking to you about just before off air, we're talking about the polarisation of the community and how exhausting it becomes. Like I know you said you've been into the city on the weekend. There was some protest still going on in there, and there's a lot of people saying to you, "Oh my God, you're not with them, are you?" And I think you probably get that from the side of the protesters too. They think, "Oh God, you're not with them as well." Especially once you've got a microphone, people don't know exactly where it is you fit in. People are quick to judge, and that's what I found really polarising. Is there was like an us and them.
Okay, I have one more question. What are your thoughts on the jewellery revelations, the expose, the leak? Do you have any thoughts to share on that?
Yeah, I do. Look, you know, I ran for the federal election. I ran as an independent for the Senate, and there was a lot of difficulties there too. The corruption is not so much, I think, maybe in that the votes aren't counted correctly, although that may be part of the corruption. I'm not saying it's not, but what I saw the corruption as being is the process itself was corrupt. So I was involved in a situation in the federal campaign where I was on a ballot, but my name didn't appear next to it, and somehow that seemed fair. But anyone that was involved with a party structure, their name appeared next to where you would put the vote. It's demoralising. It's so corrupt, it's demoralising. And that's what I love at least about the Freedom Party. They made a political stance, and their political stance was, we will not deal with any party that does a deal with Glenn Drury, come what may. Now, these alternative parties have said, oh, that'll just be playing into the hands of the Greens, because the Greens will end up winning as a result. Well, so be it. So be it. Maybe it needs to go down further down the chute before any meaningful change can happen.
What an interesting interview. Thank you for that, Natalie. Now we have Olivia here to discuss some of the key election issues for us.
absolutely. I mean, look, probably not any policies like the Freedom Party, but you've been researching, you've been busy. Look at these notes here, right? What have you got for us?
Well, I'll give you a quick rundown of the three sort of big candidates. So obviously we've got Labor.
I'm from Queensland. Who are they?
Well, we've obviously got Labor and Liberals in every state, and the Greens. So they're kind of the three big parties, and their leaders are the potential premiers. So we've got incumbent Dan Andrews, he's been premier since 2014. Split opinions on him, and his kind of big opponent is Matthew Guy, leader of the Liberals. This is his second stint as the leader of Vic Liberals, and he came into leadership after a 2021 leadership spill. And then we've got Samantha Ratnam, who's the leader of the Greens. And yeah, she was the first Greens mayor for the city of Moreland. She has a history in social work as well. So that's who we're looking at to lead the parties coming into this election. Cost of living is obviously a big issue this election.
Absolutely. I mean, definitely my shopping's been getting more expensive. How about you?
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah.
Yeah, people are really feeling the pressure of it. So I'm going to break down those kind of policies first. So the Liberals and Labor both have some policies around PTV. So Labor wants to cap the daily fare for V-lines at the same rate as the Metro cap, so that's $9.20. Liberals want to bring that Metro cap down to $2 a day for regular card holders, $1 a day for concession holders, but their plans for V-line are nowhere near as ambitious. The Greens are looking a lot more systemically. They're hoping to cap rental price increases, and they want to bring dental and mental under Medicare, make them free for people in the public system.
Would they be able to do that as like a state party? Because I'm pretty sure Medicare's federal.
Yeah, so it's actually a policy that they promote, nationally, and each state, like Greens Party, has a focus on that as well. So, yeah, and then out-of-pocket education expenses for people whose children are in the public school system. They want to scrap any kind of expense there and make education truly free and truly equitable. And then Labor and the Greens are focusing on energy for cost of living as well. So they want to bring down household costs. And then there's
been another big issue this election, hasn't there? With
what is it, Lachlan?
All the hospitals, all the 000.
Yes.
Definitely, what are the commitments there?
Yes, well, healthcare has kind of been a bit of an arms race this election. So it's the 000 crisis. We saw, a lot of people in the last couple of years not being able to get to hospital, waiting a long time for ambulances. So Labor and Liberal are both trying to combat that in different ways. Liberals are looking more at kind of increasing funding to, dispatching and kind of training more nurses, making room for more hospital beds. But yeah, they really want to upgrade IT systems and kind of, bring 000 into the 21st century. Whereas Labor are looking more at like bonuses for nurses signing on to their first jobs in the next couple of years. They're looking at paying for education for nurses and midwives. They also want to bring in a role to allow certain paramedics to diagnose and treat in field. So reduce the need for people to actually need to come to hospital. And then both Labor and Liberal are looking at IVF services as something that, more and more families are looking at. So they want to make these services more affordable for people. Labor wants to bring it into the public system, whereas Liberal want to, give rebates to people. So that's kind of the major health policies.
Absolutely. So I think they're bringing a lot to the table, aren't they? Really, all of them, but only one can win. So with the IVF, I guess, really. So we've got one party looking more at in-hospital. They're focusing on really the in-hospital care, and then another party really focusing on that allied health almost.
Yeah. So I mean, Labor want to bring in a public clinic. Whereas Liberal want to kind of, provide rebates for people who are already going through the private system. So those rebates would be up to $2,000 for the first, treatment cycle. And then if that fails, a second rebate would be available of the same amount. So yeah, they have different ways of going about it, but they both are really focusing on IVF. The Greens, on the other hand, are focusing more on greening the healthcare system. They look at homelessness and housing instability as a healthcare issue as well. So their focus is a little bit sort of less on hospitals and more on those sorts of issues.
More into the community. Well, I guess it all comes back to cost of living.
It does. And a lot of the issues we'll be discussing tonight do come back to cost of living.
Absolutely. Later you'll be talking with us about, infrastructure and really how are we paying the bills on all of this. So this is our political analyst, Olivia Sanders. She's got the facts. She's done her own research, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your time.
No worries.
This is VicVotes.
Thank you so much for that, Olivia. Sometimes I find understanding party policies is a bit difficult, so thank you for analysing and breaking those down for us. Now we'll cross back over to Natalie in the north.
We've gone to Natalie. It's me? Okay. Well, it's way quieter now out here in Brighton. Not as many people here are walking the streets. It's a bit colder. It's definitely much more bleaker in the sky. I think some rain's going to be coming through soon. Now, James Newberry, he's hoping to hold on to the seat of Brighton, although this 1% voting gap is making it very difficult for him, and it's very uncertain for the Liberal Party. He is going to be focusing on education, it seems. He is investing $5 million into the Brighton Secondary College. He also is hoping to develop the recreational sporting opportunities for the people of Brighton here by investing $2 million into the Brighton Beach Oval to redevelop better change rooms and better facilities at that sporting facility over there. Now, with the Labor Party, Louise Crawford, she's focusing on the environment and ensuring that the environment is maintained and ensuring that the future residents of Brighton have a safer environment to live in. She's also focusing on access to healthcare, which is definitely a very hot issue here within the state election. She's focusing on specifically getting better access for those within disadvantaged communities to healthcare and other important facilities that every resident really has a right to here in Brighton.
Move these back to where they were.
In Caulfield, the most marginal electorate in Melbourne and Victoria last state election, with local MP Deputy Liberal leader David Southwick just scraping through on less than 300 votes in 2018.
I'm not sure how many friends I have in terms of those that voted against me. Hopefully I have a few more friends in the room, but at the end of the day, it's great that people have come out in a democratic way to have their say.
Here at Glen Iris City Hall, candidates came together for a robust discussion, fielding questions from voters on big political issues that matter here in Caulfield.
We've seen what the major parties can offer, and quite frankly, we're sick of it, and with good reasons.
I want a planning system overhaul, and I want education given to public schools, not private schools.
I'm a candidate who really cares about the animals. I'm doing everything for quality for people too.
Anything to promote vaccine hesitancy is considered to be inappropriate behaviour. Sorry guys. Thanks.
The forum saw robust exchanges between candidates and the audience.
Thank you for your question. I think we'll move on to the next question now. Thank you.
The next question is from me. Is from me.
One fiery exchange came over Liberal MP David Southwick's proposal for a $550 million redevelopment of Caulfield Hospital. Labor says that proposal is uncosted, but Southwick says that's because the government won't release key figures.
By his own admission, this is a figure that's uncosted. The Liberals have already been tricked up with promising. You said the Alfred said 550.
I went to the government to get the plans. The government would not release those plans to me. I arrived on the $550 million figure by talking to Alfred Health and said, well, I know you've been talking to the government. What are the plans? And they said, we can't give it to you, the government won't give you, but I'll tell you it's $550 million.
With a crowded field of political contenders and the last election coming down to just a handful of votes, it looks like David Southwick's political career could be on life support. Lachlan Patrick, RMITV, Caulfield.
Thanks very much for the video, Lachlan. Caulfield's actually my home seat, and it's Lachlan's home seat as well, so it's something we know a lot about. So speaking of Caulfield, let's have a closer look at it. Look at how close those lines are from the 2018 election. The margin was less than 1%. Look at how close that is. That's insane. So what we can see here is that Caulfield is one of the most hotly contended seats at the 2018 election. We're certainly not expecting that to change right here, especially after the boundaries were redistributed at the end of 2018, just like most seats, well, all seats really. The margin for the Liberals went from 1% towards the Liberals to, well, it's actually quite disputed ever since the boundaries were redrawn, depending on who you ask. But the Victorian Electoral Commission says that the margin is actually in Labor's favour by 0.2%. So is it a Labor seat or a Liberal seat? Depends on who you ask. We're going to be considering it a Liberal seat tonight, not for the 2022 election, obviously, considering a Liberal candidate currently holds the seat from the 2018 election. David Southwick, he's the Deputy Liberal leader, so it's going to be a pretty interesting seat to watch, a very important one as well. So we're going to need to keep a close eye on this one. But Labor has seen some pretty steady gains over the past 2 elections. And this election, they've got Labor candidate Lyle Harrell, who will certainly put up some fierce competition for David Southwick, who we can see right there is in some pretty hot water already. So we'll definitely be keeping a close eye on this one tonight. But something we do need to talk about as well is the independent in the Caulfield seat, Naomi Coltman. She's been making a lot of noise. She's backed by the same group who got Zoe Daniels into the seat of Goldstein in the national election, the federal election, sorry. So she's certainly one to watch. She's for climate. She's been making a lot of moves. So how will her climate plans stack up with David Southwick's health plans? That's something we'll definitely need to keep a close eye on. But let's move away from the seat of Caulfield and move on to the seat of Bass. This is another one that the redistribution has shaken up. It's gone from a 2.4% Labor margin to 0.7% margin in favour of the Liberals. We've got a lot of massive swing seats tonight. It's going to be really interesting to keep an eye on these. This one's currently held by Labor, obviously, but now that we see it swinging a bit more towards the Liberals, we might see that shake up a bit. The seat was actually held for by the Liberals for 16 years until the last election, 2018, when Labor clinched their first victory in the seat. But this redistribution in the boundaries could certainly put the seat back in the Liberal hands, so we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that one. Moving along, we're going to have a look at the seat of Nepean, which became Labor in 2018 after they had some very sharp gains after 2014. It was Liberal from 2002 to 2018 under Martin Dixon, who retired just before the 2018 election, and that's when we saw it go Labor. So this seat has a 0.7% margin for Labor, with Sam Groth taking over Martin Dixon as the Liberal candidate. And something you're going to see a lot with these graphs we're showing today is that the lines there between Labor and Liberal, they're really, really close. And something we can see as well with this one is that, I don't know if you can see the very faint white line on this red bar here. It's a bit towards the third over there. But you can see that white line, that means that's everything to the right of that. That means it was won based on preferences. So we can certainly see the power of preferences here for the Labor candidates. So this is going to be very interesting to keep an eye on as well. Moving on, we're going to have a look at the seat of Hawthorn, another Labor seat. This is held by John Kennedy right now, who took home a very shock victory against John Pisciuto, who is actually running again this year. So it's going to be interesting which John is going to win. We'll definitely keep you guys updated on that one throughout the night, but it's going to be a very interesting one to have a look at. The redistribution of this seat's boundaries makes Labor slightly more likely, and they hold a margin of 0.6%. Again, continuing with that trend that we have here with very, very slim margins. These are the seats that are going to keep things very, very interesting this election. These are the ones to watch. These are the ones that are going to give us a little bit of action tonight. So these are the ones to watch. Let's keep an eye on those, but we're going to move along to the seat of Melbourne, just before we cross to Sophia in the city. Seat of Melbourne, this is a Greens held seat. It's actually the Deputy Green leader, Alan Sandel, and Labor's been on a bit of a trend upwards with this seat, which has been quite interesting, and is the main contender out of the big two parties. So the Greens could have a bit of a threat against the from the Labor candidates tonight. But this is one of the 3 seats the Greens are expected to hold on to tonight. Again, one to watch, of course, a very important one to keep an eye on because it is the Deputy Greens leader, a big seat of power for them, especially in the CBD. You've got so many people, but we do have a Greens margin of 1.7%. So it is one of the more secure seats that we're having a look at in this segment. but nevertheless, always one to watch. We can see a big Labor presence right here for this one, with the Liberal presence being a bit more on the minor end. So it's really going to be a race between the Greens and Labor tonight for the seat of Melbourne. So talking about the seat of Melbourne, we're going to cross live now to our reporter Sophia, who's in the city. Sophia, what is going on?
So I'm currently at the State Library. It's a bit hectic in the city today. There were a couple of protests earlier and trams just seem not to be running. So I was hoping to be at the the Koori Heritage Trust at Federation Square. So pretend that's behind me. So earlier today I paid a visit there and I was very lucky to speak to Lucas Hyatt, who works there and who takes people on tours. He's also a Koori man himself. And we have sat down and just had a bit of a talk about the issues that he thought were most prominent for himself personally as a young person, and also for the Koori community. And though he said he couldn't speak for the wider community that he's not part of, he did say that issues that seem to concern the Koori community and Indigenous community of Victoria are mostly, there's a massive issue with logging, which he's reckoned to New South Wales and said that he hopes it doesn't end up like that here in Victoria. But he said that there's a massive issue with native logging and how that's affecting the wildlife, which he's very concerned about. And also as a massive part of land is extremely important to Koori culture and Indigenous culture, that obviously strikes hard. Also the housing issue is also a massive concern that affects everybody in the community. But predominantly it also does affect the Indigenous community here in Victoria. Another massive issue he spoke about was education, which he hopes to see a change. So he did say that apparently in VCE programs there is going to be some changes so that VCE students do need to learn about Indigenous culture here in Australia, but he says that he hopes that can be extended to the wider community and adults as well. Unfortunately, we couldn't tee up that interview right now, but if you do want to look at that, you can head to the Journalism Society socials where we will be posting that one. But it was really interesting to get his perspective, especially as a young person and a Koori person. He will be voting later today, so he hadn't quite voted yet, but he said that those were the issues that he was considering when voting this afternoon.
Thanks, Sophia. I'm here with guitarist Scott Renton of the band Barefoot Spacemen. Now, musicians like you have had, I guess, a bit of a tough couple of years over COVID, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess everyone has, but you know, we all saw live music was sort of one of the last industries, along with hospitality, I suppose, to recover.
Can't really socially distance in a mosh pit.
No, not really. So yeah.
Yeah. So I guess with your band, how did you adapt? How did that impact you?
We just spent a lot more time writing, I guess, and planning stuff. It was, you know, if we're looking at the positives, it was nice to sort of just stop the chaos of gigs all the time, to spend time writing, planning, recording, thinking about what we can do when everything's back to normal. But it, you know, it was a bit, you don't know when that's going to happen. So it got old after a while, but we're okay now, I think. So yeah.
There you go. You got through it. You survived.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I guess what was it like? Is this your main kind of source of income?
No, well, I'm lucky because I have another job as well. A lot of people don't, obviously, which made it really difficult. So yeah, I had JobKeeper, which helped a lot, obviously. But I guess, you know, beyond it being a source of income, it's like supplementary income, but it's sort of like a passion project as well. So as much as you have that safety net paying the bills, it's sort of where you're getting your happiness from, you know, and like you need to get joy out of life. So
yeah. So when did you play your first live show?
Ever?
Ever.
With this band?
Yeah.
2015, I think.
Oh, there we go.
At
Going
the
down memory
Brunswick
lane
Hotel. Yeah, but that's not there anymore. Not because of COVID.
Yeah.
The roof flooded, but it's a whole other story. Yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, so now you're getting back into it. Like you've got a gig tonight, actually.
Yeah.
Got to rush off. Yeah. So what's it been like since COVID, actually, with that kind of live music?
Well, I guess we had a few false starts, which was difficult because, you know, you get your hopes up and then it just goes away again. Since, I guess, sort of we let it rip, to call it that, maybe November last year. There's been a lot of interruptions just with people are getting COVID still, bands are getting COVID. Venues have been, I guess, more reluctant to host live music, partly because of COVID, partly because since then, public liability insurance has increased a lot for venues. So we're seeing some can't afford to operate anymore, others are operating but without band rooms anymore. The Grace Starling in Collingwood's an example. They're not really doing gigs anymore, but they've expanded sort of the food and drink offering because that's making them more money, I guess. Colour clubs closing, which is a sad one. They just can't do it financially anymore either.
Absolutely. I mean, we nearly lost a Curtin Hotel there. It was looking a bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I guess, one nice thing that's happened is that someone saved the Curtin.
We saved the Curtin. We're going there after the show.
Oh, there you go.
Tag along.
Yeah.
But I guess you have not tuned in to Triple J. This is still VicVotes, and we're here to talk politics. So there's been a lot of promises made this election, but you're not entirely sold on all of them.
No, I mean, we'll see after the election. A lot of the policies that are there are really good in theory, and I hope that whoever does get empowered follows through with them. I guess, Labor, I think they committed like $7.5 million with, payments of up to $1,000 for artists per gig, which it's a substantial amount of money, but if you sort of do the maths, there's kind of like 50 places in Melbourne each night of the week that are hosting gigs. Yeah. If you want to pay a band $1,000, that's going to run out in about half a year, Yeah. So it's all well and good, but it's not really sustainable, I suppose. I can't complain. It's still money, but...
You wonder where it's coming from.
Well, I guess taxpayers are paying for it, so that's good in that it's still stimulating sort of that aspect of the economy. I know the Greens were wanting to pilot a living wage, I guess, for artists. I think they're extending that to 200 people. I guess the interesting thing there is how will that be means tested? How will you qualify? What qualifies as a creative, which is the wording they've used. And then I think it's like 42K or something. So it's a livable wage, but it's not a great wage. And, with the cost of everything sort of going up, I'm not sure how sustainable that may be either. But I guess that's the point of the pilot. It's still a step in the right direction, but we'll see who gets in and what happens.
Absolutely. So I guess, look, the votes are being counted right now. The election, it's been decided. What would you like to see on Monday when we get a new government? Whoever that may be.
I guess a lot of things.
What's the wish list?
Wish list, if purely for music, I guess. I think some sort of regulation on capping public liability insurance would be good, because I think that's what's really sucking the life out of venues right now. An investment, which I think the Greens have committed to in, I think they called it future-proofing venues. So that's adding ventilation to live music spaces, because that was kind of the biggest reason we couldn't get back to doing it. It's fine to say host an outside gig, but it's been raining every day this year. Today is dry and it's just windy. So, even then gigs aren't sort of feasible either. So investing in stuff like that would be good. I think, more music in the regions would be nice as well. I think Labor committed some money to that.
Liberals. Are you heading out there anytime soon? Or?
We're playing in Geelong in January. It's not,
there you go.
I guess, not super regional. It's not Melbourne though.
Yeah.
And then we got another little festival out in Healesville after that. So, but yeah.
Well, look, enjoy those gigs. You've got one to get to right now, so I won't keep you any longer than you have to be. We've got our reporters out on the street, as they always are. They're absolutely hustling. Let's see who we can check in with now.
I'm here in Northcote at the Baptist Church on High Street. The ALP has been in power for the majority of Northcote's history, but now people are betting for the Greens to win. There's lots of interest also towards the independent parties like the Freedom Party, Reason, or Family First. I'm basically talking about vets, and they're quite excited, and I won't say much more than that.
Ashlyn, as soon as that light.
We've seen a record number of people early voting in the state election. The Victorian Electoral Commission revealed with 1 in 3 votes have already... I took to the streets of Melbourne earlier this week to ask people about the issues that will tip their vote this election.
Library in Melbourne, where the upcoming state election is on the minds of a record number of people who voted early.
I actually am from regional Victoria and I'm enrolled in a different electorate, so it was easy to do a postal vote.
I just vote the same way usually, there's sort of no issues that have changed anyway that I think it's all pretty much still the same.
I'm voting for an independent this time around.
No, I haven't voted yet. I'm looking forward to voting on Saturday though. Yeah. So I've not really researched who I'm going to vote for yet. I'm just sort of going to show up and see what happens.
A bit worried about the wildlife, the extinction of some animals or the near extinction and the pulling down the forests and so forth.
About COVID, because it has been spreading right now.
We're very concerned about it, and the COVID-19 damaged the economy. I think in the next few years, the economy will need to be rebuilt.
Climate change, which I think for the same answer for a lot of young people, massive issue for me and a big decider, the policies around that.
A lot of the environmental considerations, things like easier access to transport, especially in the city.
Really passionate about there being a suburban rail loop. I think it's ridiculous that Melbourne is considered, the livable city and a really big metropolitan city, but doesn't have the same transport infrastructure as a lot of other world cities like Tokyo, London. Daniel Andrews has said he's going to do that. So far he's delivered on the railway crossing thing, which I see as like the first stage of that whole project.
I'm actually a very sort of anti-political person, really. So to be very honest, what I normally do, I usually vote for the Greens because I go like they're sort of undervalued. You probably can hear my accent, I'm German. And I think in Germany, at one stage, the Greens came into power and things changed. But for one example, you probably wouldn't see any beer cans or bottles because everything was recycled and actually you got money for it. And I think South Australia does that, but not in Victoria yet.
Greens is something that's some people that stand out to me. I just, don't want more investments in coal and gas and people to take it seriously and not be, just teaming up with their buddies in big companies and giving them deals because it helps them,
There's no one issue set to decide this election, but a variety on the minds of voters across the political spectrum. Ashlyn O'Brien, RMITV, Melbourne.
Some very interesting perspectives there. So Ashlyn, what was it like heading out on the streets?
It was amazing. It was a really good experience. I think going out in public and getting people like that, you get their real opinion about what matters most to them. It was my first time going out in public and interviewing people, so yeah.
No, that's amazing.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, you spoke to some really interesting people. I love that woman with the blue hair.
Yeah.
Really rocking the style. So what were those people like?
I think the main kind of issues that kept coming up were climate change, the economy, COVID-19 in relation to the economy, as well as transport in Melbourne. It was really interesting. A lot of people I spoke to had already voted. I think people were really eager to get in and cast their vote this election. We actually have had the biggest, largest voter participation in Victoria this state election with 4.4 million people enrolled to vote. Yeah.
That's incredible, actually.
Yeah.
Getting out there. A lot of people mentioned climate. What type of issues came up with that?
I think a lot of people kind of came up with coal and oil and gas, not having any more of that. And the Greens Party is probably the only party that's kind of promised to ban those things. And the Greens Party is actually the party, that has the net zero, the closest year that they're gonna 2035, compared to the Coalition and Labor. So yeah, I think the Greens Party came up a bit in relation to the climate, and then we had one lady in particular that spoke about like the wildlife and endangered animals, and quite concerned about that. Yeah.
I think transport is another big issue this election that the parties are focusing on. What did people have to say about that?
The first thing that kind of came up was the suburban rail loop, which obviously the Andrews government is his project and has kind of been seen to be delivering on it, which is the only concern with the coalition, you know, kind of looking at cutting that, because I think, as it was mentioned in the video by one of the interviewees, as Melbourne's such a livable city and we don't have the transport that kind of reflects that compared to other cities. Yeah.
And maybe lastly, how about like the economy and COVID-19? Obviously coming out of the pandemic, what did people have to say?
I think people just haven't forgotten, you know, with the, like I wasn't here during the lockdowns, but that kind of came up, and the economy obviously really suffered from the long lockdowns that Victoria had. And yeah, I think people were quite, concerned about the economy and how that's going to look. And obviously the coalition is quite critical of the current economy under the Labor government, and that's where they kind of said they will scrap the suburban rail loop, which apparently is projected to save about 9.6 billion in upfront spending.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that, Ashlyn. It was really interesting hearing everyone's opinions out on the street. And now we'll switch to Lachlan.
Very interesting. I mean, very, very interesting conversations and topics there that they brought up with the transport and COVID and all of that. I mean, there's a lot of things on a lot of people's minds this evening. Now, the seat where a lot of early voting's been happening is the seat of Caulfield, and I believe we may have someone there now, or a report. It's a surprise. Let's find out.
Dandenong Range's emergency services have been hit by heavy rains which ravaged the region in the past month. It comes as a blow to Hills community residents who are still recovering from last year's June storms.
We've had a significant event. We're trying to recover from that, but now we've got these floods, we've got drainage issues, and all these other things that are happening as well.
Unsealed roads have contributed to the flooding, with the federal government stripping $300 million from the Sealing the Hills program. Now, local councils take to the state candidates to see what they can offer for the Monbulk electorate. Labor MP James Molina's resignation has put this safe seat up for grabs. Liberal candidate Gareth Ward pledges $2 million to build a CFA in Monbulk, easing pressure on Victoria's third busiest CFA in Emerald. Meanwhile, Labor candidate Daniela Di Martino pledges $1 million to fix stormwater management systems. Social media videos show floodwaters trapping residents in their homes amid Monbulk's wettest October on record. Over 120 mils of rain drenched the region, doubling the monthly average.
The infrastructure, a lot more money has to be allocated in terms of basic infrastructure. The SES need to be given a lot better funded as well too.
Flood-impacted residents now have to rely on community support as a result. Local not-for-profit food pantry, Open Community Care, fielded 384 requests in the past month. It is clear that inadequate infrastructure worsens the impact of these weather events. Local candidates must prioritise natural disaster mitigation, or they too risk being washed away with the rest of the electorate. Oliver Wynne, RMITV, Monbulk.
Results are finally coming in from the VEC, so let's get started at the seat that Ollie just talked about, Monbulk. It's usually a safe Labor seat, and we can certainly see that reflected in the results tonight. It's still early days, so don't take this as an indication of who's going to win just yet, but Labor is taking a pretty strong lead after having a pretty close tussle with the Liberal Party a bit early on. We're definitely going to see some more from this seat as it goes on, but as it is a safe Labor seat, we aren't really expecting a whole lot of movement from here. The person who holds this seat at the moment, James Molina, who you might know as at one point or another, our acting premier, but he is retiring and Daniela Di Martino will be taking his spot as the Labor candidate. And as we can see, the electorate is receiving her quite well in the early numbers. We're going to move on now to some of the seats that have just newly been formed this year, some returning from over a decade ago and some new ones formed just this year. We're having a look at a graph of Point Cook right now, which has nothing interesting on it whatsoever, because there is nothing happening in that electorate right now. The results haven't quite come in for that yet, but that's all right. We've still got some interesting stuff about it. You might have actually already seen this seat before. This seat used to be the Altona seat, except that was abolished prior to this election. And now we have, as a result, what we are predicting to be a pretty safe Labor seat. When it was named Altona, it was held by Jim Hennessy of Labor, which is a main reason why we're going to be calling this one a safe Labor seat tonight. Definitely want to have a look at when results finally do actually trickle in. But you know what? It'll come at some point. The night is still young. So how about we move on to another new seat, Glen Waverley, another returning seat from a while ago. And we can actually see some results on that one, thank God. So we can see Labor is definitely taking a fair bit in the early numbers, but Liberal is right hot on their heels, which is to be expected because when the Glen Waverley seat was formed, it was formed as sort of a bit of a combination of two old seats. It was formed with a combination of Mount Waverley, which was a Labor seat, and Forest Hill, which was a Liberal seat. And as a result, as tallying in the voters that we're getting from each seat, each old seats, sorry, we're looking at a marginal Liberal seat at 0.9%. And while we're not exactly looking at that Liberal lead we're expecting right now, we might see something happen a little bit later into the night, so we'll keep you updated on this one. Moving on, we're going to have a look at the seat of Berwick, another new seat. This was formed as a result of the Gembrook seat being abolished prior to this election. As we can see, we don't really have any results here right now, but an interesting fact for you is the Gembrook seat. The Berwick seat took 21,000 voters from that old Gembrook seat, yet that doesn't even form half of the population of the electorate. So something to think about. The marginal Liberal, it is a marginal Liberal seat with a margin of 1.3%. That mainly comes from Gembrook's Liberal roots. So we'll see how that carries into Berwick, perhaps. We don't know. It might happen, it might not. We don't really have any results on this one right now, but again, the polls only closed about an hour and 10 minutes ago, so we don't know what's happening quite yet, but this will definitely be one to keep an eye on. We'll move on to our last seat looking at for this segment before we toss over to our reporter Sophia, still in the CBD. We're going to have a look at Brunswick, which is popping up right now. And we can see, just like a lot of the other seats, we don't have a whole lot to talk about on that one, but that's okay because, again, the night is still young. The Greens actually held this seat at the end of the last election, and they have a margin of 2%. And we're definitely expecting them to hold on to this seat. This is Tim Reed's seat from the Greens, one of the few seats that the Greens currently holds. And from what I've read, they're expecting to hold this seat. So is it good news for the Greens? We'll find out a bit later into the night, but with a 2% margin, it is a bit safer than some of the seats we've been discussing a bit earlier before. Their biggest party competitor would be Labor, who has been seeing some sharp rises in this seat. It's always been a bit of a contest between them in this seat ever since the Greens were introduced into this seat. But that is definitely something to have a look at a bit later, maybe when we actually have some votes tallied from that one. But, you know, got to be done by hand. It's a bit slow, but that's what the election is. It's a slow burn, and we're here to have a look at it tonight. So we're in for a bit of a long haul tonight. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for some more votes to be tallied, we're going to cross over to our eyes in the city, Sophia, who's definitely got some good stuff happening for us in the CBD. Sophia, what have we got going on over there?
So I'm currently just next to Parliament at the Gardens here, opposite the Princess Theatre. We've got a couple of guests that are loving to speak right now. Definitely getting the most action from people around here. I had a man just walk past before and boast to his friends that he's managed to not vote for 7 years. So it's definitely an interesting crowd that's happening over here. But amongst the people who I did speak to who did actually vote, the growing theme seems to be around climate issues. And I guess it's been really hard to ignore with floods, fires, pandemic, all the craziness that's happened. So when I spoke to people on the streets, and when I also spoke to people at the mosque and, at the Koori Heritage Trust as well, everyone seems to be talking about climate issues. So I thought I would just say a little bit about which what each government is planning to do. So Labor government is wanting to revive the State Electricity Commission with $1 billion towards clean energy, new renewable energy targets, 65% by 2030 and 95% by 2035. The Liberal and National Coalition back 1 million Victorian households to install solar and batteries by 2035, encourage conventional onshore gas exploration and production, 100% of new gas to be reserved for Victorian consumers without fracking, pause electric vehicle levy and establish 600 new charging stations across the state. And the Greens want to ban any new coal, oil and gas, plan to get 1 million Victorian homes off gas and a ban on connecting new homes to the network. Phase out remaining coal plants by 2030, jobs guaranteed for all coal and gas workers, and increase renewable energy target to 100% by 2030. So I was reading that one just from The Age, who is reporting those details. So it'll be interesting to see whichever government comes in, whether they will address those issues that the public seems to be really passionate about. I think a lot of people, whether the Koori Heritage Trust was talking about native logging, other people that I spoke to in the streets were talking about how, they have families that have been impacted by these issues. So it'll be really interesting to see which government comes in and whether they do actually address the growing climate crisis.
So that's why it's important that Lily can introduce the live.
Okay. Climate change has been a major talking point in the Yarra community, with the majority of emissions coming from fossil fuels. The Yarra City Council put the climate emergency front and centre during the campaign, advocating for a climate-safe Yarra for the future.
Next Victorian election, the desire for climate action has been prominent in the Yarra community. Data published by the Yarra City Council showed 83% of the Yarra community's emissions come from stationary electricity and gas used in commercial, industrial and residential buildings. The Yarra Council has been attempting to address these emissions by facilitating the installation of solar panels and the construction of a community battery in North Fitzroy.
There's community batteries. We've already got one up and running, which means those who have excess solar during the day can export it to this battery in the street. Those who can't use solar can actually draw on the battery and have renewable, locally generated power.
Community groups such as Yarra Climate Action Now are hoping to see the Yarra community help reduce transport emissions through the construction of bike paths and the use of electric vehicles.
EVs are going to be a game changer in terms of massively reducing carbon dioxide emissions from vis-a-vis internal combustion engines. We're trying to work with council to help solve the problem with multi-unit developments and help people like myself who only have access to on-street parking.
Climate action in the Yarra has gained interest from politicians on a local level. Mike Williams, Labor candidate for the seat of Brunswick, is aiming to work with businesses to reduce waste and to ensure that there is a switch to renewable energy.
It's going to be necessary to work very closely with businesses over waste management and recycling, given we're moving to different types of bins in Victoria. But I think as we ramp up to decarbonising the economy, I think businesses are such a central part of that, and we need to make it as easy as possible for them to invest in renewable energies, get solar if they can, invest in batteries if they can.
The Yarra Council is seeking commitment from candidates and parties to act on priorities that support tangible ways to address the climate emergency. These priorities include investing in local climate initiatives, supporting a circular economy, and improving local biodiversity. Regardless of the results of the next Victorian election, there is the expectation that collective efforts will be needed to mitigate the effects of climate change. Raphael Gerster, RMIT University, Melbourne.
That was a very interesting report. It looks like there's a lot going on in the Yarra.
Yeah, definitely. Great reporting. So how are the parties aiming to reduce and address climate change really here? Because there's a lot being put on the table, isn't there?
Absolutely. So Tim Reid, who's the Greens MP for the seat of Brunswick, which does cover Yarra suburbs such as North Carlton and North Fitzroy,
So this is kind of like inner city?
Yeah, mostly inner city. He's aiming to commit to a 75% reduction of emissions by 2030, and he's trying to employ a variety of strategies to achieve that particular target. So that could include replacing coal with 100% clean energy by 2030, banning all new fossil fuel projects, including onshore gas, investing in green manufacturing and green hydrogen, investing over $1 million worth of maintenance and tree planting in Melbourne General Cemetery, which is located in North Carlton, and promoting electric vehicles and all-electric government fleet. And Mike Williams, who's the Labor candidate for the seat of Brunswick, who I did interview in the package, is part of a party which aims to achieve 95% renewables by 2035. That will require several strategies, like he wants to make voters aware of the Dan Andrews government's plans for offshore wind farms. A re-elected Labor government aims to build 100 community batteries across Victoria, including the Yarra. The purpose of these batteries is to increase storage capacity so that many more households can benefit from surplus solar-generated electricity to the grid. Mike Williams' party also intends to achieve up to 80% emissions reduction by 2035. In his early morning railway station meet and greets, Williams has been informing voters of the government's $250 power-saving cash rebate program. Williams and the Labor government intend to remove every level crossing in the Brunswick electorate and build a dedicated bike path to the city.
So stopping those idling cars, that's all the emissions.
Yeah,
exactly.
But Raf, how is the council making sure candidates reduce their emissions?
So as I stated in my package, the Yarra Council released a document with 2022 election advocacy priorities, which seek commitment from candidates and parties to act on a number of key priorities that respond to the climate emergency. So one key priority is reducing waste. So that means, implementing strict national sustainable packaging standards and product stewardship, and providing increased funding to industry and local government for local processing solutions, sector innovation and market development. Another interesting priority is the take-up of electric vehicles. So the Yarra desires for the provision of financial incentives to businesses to purchase electric vehicles, and also increase funding for public electric vehicle chargers, including a commitment to deliver $250,000 for 5 new EV chargers across the Yarra. And finally, a third and final key priority is improving the natural environment. So, that means providing ongoing funding for the cleanup of local parks and waterways, providing $150,000 to support tree planting across the Yarra and help reduce the urban heat island effect while improving livability, and investing in sustainable water solutions with $4.9 million for Council's Gibbs Street Food Mitigation Project to find a long-term and sustainable food mitigation solution.
Absolutely. So I guess we've got these big commitments from the candidates, and the council really calling on them for more, but is the community stepping up? I mean, what action's being taken right now?
I think the community is stepping up. I mean, they have, employed a variety of strategies to make sure that emissions continue to lower. So one interesting strategy that they're using is more attention to renewable energy. So the Yarra Council recently partnered with a non-profit organisation called the Yarra Energy Foundation.
What do they do?
Well, they're facilitating the installation of community batteries and also solar systems. There was the installation of 90 solar systems in the last year, and there have been more than 2,000 solar panels installed on 38 council buildings. 6 Tesla 2 batteries have been installed in community facilities, such as leisure centres and libraries. The community's also protected urban ecology. An average of 15,000 to 20,000 Indigenous ground covers and trees are planted annually, which is an interesting statistic. Ecologically based bushland management practices at 31 core bushland sites, with an additional native plant restorations programs at several other mixed landscape sites. That's also been done. And they've also stepped up through waste and resource recovery. So there's been a huge engagement between North Fitzroy businesses and customers through the plastic-free campaign to reduce the supply of plastics. And there's also been installation of new electronic waste recycling hubs across the Yarra to make recycling easier.
There we go. Very, very interesting reporting, and some great guests for interviews as well. This was our Yarra correspondent, Raf, and now we're going to head over to Lily.
Thank you for that, Raf. It's nice to hear what's going on in the Yarra. And now we're going to cross over back to our reporters out in the field to find out what's happening on the streets.
Okay, we're now in the Northcote Shopping Centre Plaza car park. As the polling booths have closed, it's eerily calm out here, yet the clouds are looming and rolling in. Looking at the update here, we've got Labor at 40.9%. Kat Yoffin Labor 45.5%. Campbell going from Greens at 54.5%. So perhaps those bets just may pay off. We're still going, this is just the update. So the outcome is just like the clouds, we don't know if it's going to rain or pour or clear. Victorian Socialists are coming in third at 9.8%. Interesting outcome here for Northcote. Any questions?
Yeah.
Now, you loved her so much the first time, she's back by popular demand. Political analyst Olivia joins us again to unpack some more party policies. Olivia, how are you doing?
Yeah, good. I'm doing well.
Caught by surprise both times. I'm very sorry. So, what have you got for us this time?
Well, you've already heard a lot about climate change and kind of the policies that the major parties are putting forward regarding climate. So, the big differences are the ambition level we're going for. Obviously, the Greens, it's in the name. Their targets are the most ambitious, but you've heard a lot about it, so I might give you the rundown of education policies.
Yeah, go for it.
Great. So,
school us.
Well, we've seen Labor in the last 4 years really put a big focus on free TAFE courses. So they will be expanding the free TAFE course list. They're also hoping to introduce free kindergarten from 2023. So that will start with 4-year-old kinder and eventually expand to 3-year-old kinder. And there's also a $1.6 billion investment to build 50 new early childhood care centres, facilities that will be state-owned and state-operated. And so that will be in the next sort of 5 to 6 years as well. The Liberals and Labor both have big plans around building and upgrading schools. And the difference there is really just like funding, with Labor committing about $600 million to it, and Liberals are saying $700 million over the next 4 years. And then the Liberals also want to rehaul the primary curriculum, and part of that will also be, part of the commitment to primary schools will also be providing healthy free lunches to schools. The Greens, on the other hand, they're looking at the equitability of primary school, and they really want to make sure that wealth doesn't dictate outcome. So their commitments are to making sure, there's no out-of-pocket expenses for families who are sending their children to public school, to really make public education truly free.
Because there are things like kind of uniforms, tablets now that can really
add
up,
exactly. So we call the public system free, but it's not really. There are out-of-pocket expenses for families there. So yeah, that's kind of what the Greens are looking at. And then the last kind of big policy that we've been seeing a lot of advertisements around the last sort of few months is infrastructure. So we've had, I'm sure you've seen the billboards from Matthew Guy about shelving the Box Hill to Cheltenham line. So the Liberals...
What is that for people who aren't aware?
Yeah, so Labor have the big build, which includes the suburban rail loop, which is, just to allow people not have to go into the city in order to go back out to the suburbs in a different direction. And the suburban rail loop will also include an airport link, so allowing people to get to the airport, Melbourne Airport, on the train. And that will also include a line from Box Hill to Cheltenham. And Matthew Guy and the Liberals have kind of said that's not our priority. We want to shelve parts of the big build in order to put money into healthcare. So we can't really untie infrastructure from healthcare in this election. But yeah, so Labor want to remove more level crossings, make train stations more safe. This also adds jobs, so that's a big part of it. Whereas Liberals are looking at adding another metro tunnel, and they're looking at $10 billion in road upgrades. The Greens, when it comes to infrastructure, they want to increase train frequency. So from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. across the train line, the Metropolitan train line, they're wanting to make 5-minute trains. And then doubling the number of accessible tram stops. They're the only party that are telling us anything about, accessibility in their infrastructure policies. And then obviously they've got a big investment into, EVs, electric vehicles. So that's kind of the big policies infrastructure-wise from the main parties.
Yeah, it's seeming like kind of trains are a big major infrastructure focus from all the parties, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of back and forth around the suburban rail loop and different sort of extensions to the train lines. So it has been a point of contention, particularly for Labor and Liberals. And I think the Greens are really trying to separate themselves a little bit here and look at other ways that people get around. For example, they've got a big investment into ensuring like safe bike lanes for people, and that's a more sustainable form of travel as well. So it does seem like Labor and Liberal are really focusing on train transport and kind of not telling us a lot about, other infrastructure projects. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Olivia, for summing all those issues up for us. And now we'll head back over to Lachlan.
Yeah, some really, really interesting stuff. As always, Olivia, she does her own research indeed. Now, it's just coming up to 7:30 and that means we're going to be leaving you soon. I'm very upset about that. So I just want to say, as we begin to wrap up, a huge thank you for tuning in and supporting us. It's a first for RMITV, a first for the Journalism Society, completely student run. We have our amazing tech team. That being said, even RMIT's incredible tech team can't call seats. They don't have RMIT's, or Anthony Green's rather, election computer, but we've got our laptop over there. We can steal his homework. So far on the ABC, Anthony Green has called about 5 seats for Labor, 3 seats for the Liberals, and 5 seats for what's looking like an ever-expanding crossbench. So results are coming in and it's looking very interesting indeed. So with all those results coming in, developments are happening. Let's get out of the studio and let's check in with one of our reporters now live on the ground.
Hi, so I'm currently outside Parliament House, just a stone's throw away from the Premier's office, which is interesting to see who will actually be residing in it from now. Well, from when results come in, which are slowly coming in. Soon we'll have the answers. Daniel Andrews has been residing there since 2014 and then was again voted in 2018. Will he get another term? I guess that's what we'll find out. What seems to be one of the big deciding factors of this election was whether you stand with Dan or you don't. And I definitely got a bit of that vibe from over the last couple of months, speaking to family, speaking to friends, speaking to people when out and about. And there really does seem to be a strong divide, whether you do like Dan or whether you don't. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens tonight and where things go. Whether he will get in or whether he won't, I'm not really sure. No one seems to be all that up for the election tonight. The weather is definitely turning on us though. I think it definitely shows the issues of climate change that everyone has been talking about. So it'll be interesting to see what the next government does about that.
All right, we've got some more results, so let's take a look. We might not have it quite on this seat. This is the seat of Caulfield. Again, a very tight race, but of course that's to be expected to have no results. With the tightest seats, we are of course expecting it to take a lot longer to get into some of the results today. So we of course see that flat line. No results right now, but the tightest seats, it's going to be a lot longer of a wait because those are the ones that like to be a bit dramatic. So anyway, we're going to move on to the next seat we have on file. This is the seat of Ashwood, and we actually do have some data for this one. Here we are, it's popping up now. So Ashwood is swaying a bit Labor at the moment, so it's looking pretty good for Labor right now. But again, they only have like 1 or 2% of their votes being counted right now. So there is still very early days, but of course we can see right here that we do have Liberal hot on their tail, and the Greens are having a bit of a nice rise up there as well. So it's looking pretty good for all the parties right here. It's still very early to call absolutely anything relating to this seat, but we do have a very promising start for Labor with Ashwood. So let's move on to the next seat we have loaded up for us. We do actually have some results. Bayswater, that graph is going. And there we go, it spreaks up a bit at the end. And we do have the Greens here right up at the top. All of the results for Bayswater are shoveling in right now. So it is a very stark rise we're seeing up there, but we're seeing a very promising start for the Greens on this seat. Hot on the tails of the other two main parties here we've got in Bayswater. This is one of the key swing seats, and we're replaying the graph again. So as you can see here, we can see, oh, there we go, it's been updated now. So we do have Labor and Liberal, we've updated the data now. Labor and Liberal are very, very close together. So we do have another very hotly contended seat right here. This is how the start of elections usually always go. We do have very close lines there. Labor and Liberal, very close. That's just how the start always is. We don't get that clearer picture until a bit later into the night, or even days away, who knows? It is pretty rough, not days away for a state election. But we'll move along to the next graph we have showing here. We do have some results for you, a bit of an improvement from our last segment, but we're gonna go regional now with the seat of Mildura, and we have it going right there. That graph is technical difficulties, live TV, you gotta love it, but it's looking quite good. But we do have the Nationals absolutely picking up the seat of Mildura right now. Jade Benham, she's fighting off the incumbent independent candidate Ali Copper, who has held the seat since the 2018 election. There we go. So it is a very close race between those two. The interesting thing here is that Ali is winning on the first preferences. The incumbent is winning on the first preferences, so she is number one on everyone's ballot papers. Where we see Jade taking a bit of a lead here, which is quite interesting, we're seeing Jade take a bit of a lead here on the preferences here. So the second, third, fourth number that you put down on your ballot sheet, that is what has brought Jade, and we've got an issue there, that is what has brought Jade ahead of Ali, the incumbent. So it is quite interesting here. We're doing quite well. It's definitely very interesting. It's nice to have some results to finally show you. Elections starts off slow, but we can certainly see it rocketing up as we display our graphs along here. You can see flat lines for a while, and then we have it spruiking right up, which is just how it goes, doesn't it? With some technical difficulties sprinkled in there. But hey, we all have them at some point. So we're going to cross over now to Ollie to see where he has ended up tonight. What have you got for us, Ollie?
So I'm just out here in the town of Ripponlea in the seat of Caulfield. Although it's a gloomy night, it does seem like the nightlife here in Ripponlea is starting to emerge. I can see a few of the restaurants around here are getting quite busy. Now, it seems like we've got a train going past here. Sorry if there's a bit of noise going on in the background there. But now David Southwick, he's just the other day he attended court to fight a case against Brighton Secondary College, fighting against some anti-Semitism going on there. Sorry for that. Which is definitely very important for the Jewish community here in Caulfield. Now for the Labor Party, Leo Harrell is going to be pledging $3 million to fight against anti-Semitism, and also another $1 million towards a Jewish community infrastructure program to facilitate this strong, thriving Jewish community that we have here in Caulfield. Labor also pledging $600,000 to the Caulfield Park Armour Bowls Club to try and facilitate the recreational life that they have here in Caulfield as well. Now Southwick, he's pledging $30 million to the Caulfield Racecourse Reserve, which then again to try and counter Labor's attempts to redevelop the life here in Caulfield, the recreational life.
Thank you so much for that, Ollie. I actually heard a train going by in the background there, but the call to electrify and extend the Frankston train line has been talked about by politicians for decades, but so far no action has been taken. However, a recent Liberal Party election promise could see works go full steam ahead.
Past Frankston is the Stony Point train line, a single-tracked, diesel-run service with an approximate wait of 2 hours between trains. However, in a bid to ensure better public transport in the south, the Liberal government has pledged to electrify and extend the train line beyond here in Frankston. The project would build 2 new stations at Frankston East and Langwarrin. This $971 million promise would be funded by both the state and federal government. The Liberal Party proposal would also see an upgrade here at Baxter Station, with the electric trains servicing the local hospital, university and businesses. Monash University student Sophia Dree thinks a station nearby the Frankston Peninsula campus would be well received by students.
If there was a train station near Monash Peninsula campus, it would be
beneficial to many students, especially those who don't have their licence or a car yet, because it would save that extra 20 minutes or so that you'd usually spend finding your way from the Frankston station to the campus itself.
Current Labor MP Paul Edbrook was unavailable for comment. However, he told the Frankston Times that he would not be supporting the train line extension as it could potentially destroy homes and land. But Committee for Greater Frankston Chief Executive Ginevra Hosking says this doesn't have to stop the extension.
It's an existing track, so if you want to do, if all you want to do is build a single track to Langwarrin, you don't have to touch a single house. The thing exists. So that isn't really an argument. Just if you don't want to knock down houses, well, take the design that builds it on the existing track. We know that's going to cost no houses. It comes down to what design do you want for the future, and the political will to actually see it through.
We'll soon see whether the Baxter Railway will be on track for completion or parked for another 4 years. Lily Cristanto, RMITV, Baxter.
There we go. That was our own Lily Cristanto, your very first news report on TV.
Yes, my first news segment.
There we go. How did it go?
Making history.
Making that. I hear it was a bit of a baptism of fire.
Yes, it was. I headed out to a few different locations. So I had Frankston Station there, and then also to Baxter, which I'd never been to before. Yeah, it was quite interesting. But with this story here, it's quite interesting because actually, the first call to action to electrify this train network was in 1929 by
nearly 100 years ago.
Yeah, nearly 100 years ago, and we're still having this debate, this back and forth, even till now.
Yeah, well look, you say not a lot of people go to Baxter Station, but I mean the trains only run every 2 hours, is that right?
Yeah, every 2 hours.
So it is a bit difficult to get there.
It is, and definitely sometimes when I've been to Frankston Station, I've heard the announcements, over the announcements that they've been cancelled as well.
So like
till
4 hours between trains.
Yeah, no, they did have bus replacements, but when I headed out to Baxter actually, I saw the reason. There was a big tree branch. Yeah, on the tracks, the SES were there. It was a lot happening, actually. Yeah.
Wow. So this is like your very first TV news story, and you're like, wow, I found another one already.
Yeah, out in the field, it's all
Baxter.
happening. Yeah.
Wow.
And I think with this story, the federal government from both sides, both Labor and Liberal, have put money aside, have budgeted for this Frankston train line extension. But now, and also the local council as well, but now it's just down to the state government, which is really the key decider whether this would go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, nothing gets built in Victoria without, the big build man giving it the go-ahead. But I guess, yeah, so why has it been proposed? I mean, we heard a little bit in that package. It's going to make it easier to get to the hospital, the university, but I guess what have you been hearing?
I think talking to some of my interviewees as well, a main part for this train line extension and to build like park and rides in places like Langwarrin is to free up the car parking space at Frankston because it's quite congested at the moment. But if we do extend that train line, people from south of Frankston and on the peninsula may be able to park there instead. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, very, very interesting. So I guess as well, the businesses, they were very, very involved, weren't they? And there was one woman, who was that who you spoke to at the beginning of the
that was Ginevra Hosking. That was the chief executive of...
She had a lot to say.
Yeah, Committee for Greater Frankston. They've been campaigning for that, I think she said since 2014 or 2015. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
They've been heavily involved with the campaigning for that, I'd say.
Well, speaking of heavily involved campaigners, normally what we do is we're very sneaky and we throw up a picture to get our sneaky getaway from the desk here. We're taking you behind the scenes. And we're going to, follow me. Here we go. We've got another interview guest right here, Jordan from Young Labor. Now, before we get started, I will say that we gave the Young Liberals as well the opportunity to appear on the show tonight. We went right to the top, or very nearly. David Southwick, Deputy Liberal Leader, he looked me in the eye yesterday and he said, Lachlan, we can't make it happen. They're all too busy scrutineering. Welcome to the show, Jordan. What is scrutineering, first of all?
Scrutineering is the most fun you'll ever have in an election.
Yeah?
It's all about making sure every ballot that you want counted is counted, really. It's a lot of watching ballots closely. It's about turning 7s into 1s. It's about making a case for 2 9s.
Absolutely. So unfortunately, we pulled you away from that today, so you could come here. Very sorry about that. But I guess how long have you been involved with the Young Labor Party?
I've been a member since 2019, the federal election. I wasn't old enough to vote. And so I was like, well, I'll get involved, I'll knock on some doors.
Enthusiastic about the cause.
So excited. It's so true. It's so true.
So what leads someone who can't even vote to join a political party?
The Labor Party is the party of change. The Labor Party's the only party that makes progressive change in Australia. The only party that forms government in its own right. It's the party with the union movement, you know. It gets things done.
Yeah, so you're definitely very passionate about that. But I guess what I also noticed, we were talking off air a little bit, and you actually pulled out your Young Labor membership card. I didn't realise, you know, when you say, oh, you're a card-carrying party member, I didn't realise it is in the literal sense. So
You get a real card.
You do, you get a real card. So when you are in, I guess, the youth division of a political party, obviously you're not running as an MP. Is that in the future though? Is that a plan?
I would never want to be an MP.
Never want to be an MP.
No. All MPs have a brain disease. I don't want it. I want to stay away from it.
There we go. Darren's like, oh no, not me. But yeah, okay. So I guess what do you do as a political advocate?
Well, the members of a party have a lot of ability to make change. I've sat on policy committees within the Labor Party, and so you literally write policy that you put to MPs. You put it to conference where the party members vote on it, and you campaign. The Young Labor movement is the boots on the ground for the Labor Party. We're the ones knocking on the doors, handing out the flyers. You know, we contact the most voters.
Yeah. So have you been campaigning with the party this election?
All election for months. Hasn't stopped really all year. Yeah.
Months. What have you been doing?
There's so many doors to knock on.
Yeah. You got them all.
Yeah, it never really stopped from the federal campaign. Continued all the way through. Such an exciting time. There's phone calls to make, doors to knock on, street stalls to run.
Yeah. So I guess, is it more of what I'm kind of hearing from you then? Is it more of a year-round presence than just right before an election?
We've been quite lucky to have 2 elections this year.
It helps, doesn't it?
It does. Normally you'd have a 6 or 7 month election campaign. So we'll probably stay quiet for a bit until council elections next year. Then we'll get back into it again.
Are you ready for a break?
You kind of miss it.
Yeah.
You know, it's been a long campaign, but the absence of it is it's a bit tough. It fills you with joy. Talking to so many voters, winning votes.
Definitely.
It's a good time.
Yeah, so you really do feel like you're achieving something, I guess.
You really are. So those conversations.
Yeah. So I guess if there were people out there who maybe don't necessarily want to join Young Labor, I know I've got to break the news, it's not for everyone, but you know, any kind of political party really, what would you want them to know about getting involved in politics in that way, joining a political party, really signing up?
I think you need to understand how institutions work and kind of understand the amount of power you can have. It's quite limited, especially if you don't know what you're doing, right? Like if you sign up, the first thing you're going to be doing is knocking on doors. It's the first thing they're going to get you to do. And unless you really understand how those organisations work, you're not going to be able to influence any change. Especially in many organisations, many political parties that aren't powered by their members.
Is that kind of something you had to grapple with a bit at the beginning, a bit of a adjustment of expectations?
Yeah, of course. I think it's just understanding how to do it, really. It's not going to be immediately obvious.
Yeah, what was something, I guess, that when you joined the party, you realised was maybe a bit different from what you expected?
At my first state conference in 2019.
What is a state conference? Is that just like a get-together?
Yeah, it's a get-together of all of the party members in the state. It's there's a conference floor where policy is decided on. You elect people on policy committees. You elect you decide on all the decisions of the party. And there's hundreds of thousands, thousands of people there. It's a big turnout. And you really get to see how the party works, how it functions as an organisation, really. It's half unions, half delegates. It's a good mix. Yeah.
So I guess before we go, I'm sure you've been following the results tonight.
I've been keeping an eye on it.
Yeah.
It's a bit tough to say. It's looking good. It's I think we're going to see a Labor government. It'll be a majority government, I reckon. I'm staying firm on that.
Quietly confident.
Prediction. Yeah, it's looking good. Especially the conversations I've had. It's seeming positive.
Yeah. Well, look. Thank you very much for coming on, Jordan. Great chat. Now, look, what we're going to do is we are going to head back out on the road and then we'll find out how all that scrutineering's been going. The Liberals are very busy doing that. Freddie will have some more results for you in just a moment. But first, let's head out on the street with our street team on the ground.
So we're still here in Northcote in the car park because the heavens have broken and it's now raining. We're seeking shelter under part of the plaza. It's been great here. Looking at the polls, it looks like the Greens are leading. So great news to all the punters out there. How's it looking over for you guys?
Russia's fucking.
So I'm here still at Parliament House. I also needed to take shelter. I was out the front, but I'm now right underneath everything. It's a good reminder being underneath this building of the systems that we have here. And definitely I've been reflecting a bit after visiting the Koori Heritage Trust as well. And just about that kind of contrast between, I guess, colonial laws that we have and how our voting system runs. And also just to keep in mind of that fact and of that history. So even though we are voting today and hoping for change and moving forward as a modern society, it is definitely important to remember that, remember these buildings, remember our history, and remember the First Nations people who were always here on this land. It's definitely very interesting around here. I am opposite the Imperial Hotel and I can see a lot of excitement over on the roof over there, but I don't believe it is for the election. It looks to be for something to do with the Football World Cup. I hope that Victorians do have the same sort of excitement, waving scarves around and, you know, sharing one with mates after the results tonight. Hopefully it's good news. How about you, Ollie? It looks like you're not having to take cover as much as we are.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to seek cover, so I'm currently sitting out here bearing the elements as I speak. It's definitely, the rain's definitely cleared out the rest of the people around here. There were a few people in this park sitting down, but they've left and gotten up. I assume that in this seat of Sandringham here, since Liberal have been holding the seat, won every single election since 1955, except for one, that they do seek to hold on to it. Brad Railswell, the Liberal candidate for this seat, he's investing $25 million to the Sandringham Hospital, which is very important considering the current healthcare crisis that we have here in Victoria. It's definitely essential that this sort of things are looked after, and I think that's what Brad Roswell is attempting to do by funding $25 million towards the Sandringham Hospital. Now, the Labor candidate, Bettina Prescott, currently on a 1% margin behind the Liberal Party. So I imagine that Bettina is hoping to take the electorate of Sandringham out of the hands of the Liberal Party, which would be a historic first win since 1955, like I mentioned before. And that's what it's like currently here in Sandringham. Thank you.
The broadcast is almost over for tonight, so let's take one last look at the results before we go. We've actually got some pretty good ones for you, including a seat that was declared while we were preparing this segment. So let's get into it. We're having a look at Albert Park over here, where Labor is leading in first preferences, which is that is not Albert Park, sorry. We've got something else there, but it should be popping up in a second. There's Albert Park, where we do have Labor leading in first preferences, but overall the Greens are leading by 5% overall. Oop, that data might be a bit old, but that's all right. This seat was previously held by Labor by a margin of 13.1%, so it's no surprise that Labor is showing a pretty heavy lead over here, especially in the first preferences that we've got today. It is considered a very Labor-safe seat, but there is only 5.1% of the votes counted right now, so it is still very early days for this one right here. We're going to move along now to our next seat. We have Bellarine, and we're going to have a look at that. As we can see, we've got the graph right here, and Labor has a pretty heavy lead right now, which is quite interesting. It is considered a very safe Labor seat. Last election, Labor caught it by a margin of 11.4%, so it's no surprise that we've got a very heavy Labor lead right here. It's quite an astonishing lead, but again, there is only 1.7% of the votes counted, so still early days for this one. This is one of the least amount of vote counts that we have in this segment, so we do have a few more advanced stats coming up for you, but Labor leading in the seat of Bellarine. We're going to move along now. We're going to head a little south. We're going to go to Mornington now, where the Liberals are leading over the independent candidate by over 10%. Only 6.1% of the votes have been counted. The graph is having a great time right there. Can't end it off without a tech difficulty. But the Liberals are leading by 10% over the independent candidate, Katie Lauder. This is no surprise considering this is a very safe Liberal seat at a margin of 5%. So definitely not the fractions of percentages we were seeing out there, but it is one of the safer seats we do have for you tonight. While it still keeps things a little bit interesting. Moving right along, we do have the seat of Clorinda, which is considered a very safe Labor seat tonight. Last election, it had a pretty good margin, but 9.3% of the votes have been counted right now. And we've got the graph coming up here. We've got a very heavy Liberal lead on this one, which is quite interesting. It is a very recent seat. Labor has held it since its inception in 2014. So it's quite interesting that we're seeing a very heavy Liberal lead on this seat of Clorinda. Maybe we'll see it change up a little bit, but 9.3% of the votes have been counted. So this is the kind of time of night where you're sort of thinking, is this how we're going to sway? Are we finally going to see Clorinda clinched by the Liberals? We'll be answering that question a little bit later, so keep up to date. We are reaching the end of the broadcast tonight, but keep up to date on your own time. Clorinda is definitely one to watch. And finally, while we were preparing this segment, Monbulk was actually called for, we have declared seats instead, and we do have Labor with a fair bit of declared seats, which is quite interesting. We do have quite a lot of declared seats for Labor. No surprise, considering everything we've been seeing so far has been pretty to plan in terms of who held the seats from last election. So we're seeing some very early calls in the safer seats, but we could definitely see this expand a little bit later into the night. So it's definitely one to watch right now. One of those which we did actually bring you early. We brought you the stats for Monbulk, which has just been called for a Labor seat while we were preparing this segment, which is really great, quite interesting. It is interesting to see that the Labor support has carried over from James Molino holding the seat, and Daniela DiMartino will be retaining that Labor support from the electorate. But that's all from me. Those are the results we have for you tonight. Thank you very much for sticking with us, and thank you very much to the tech team in Studio B. You guys have been fantastic. I'm Freddie, signing off from the RMITV Virtual Data Studio.
Well, thank you so much, Freddie, for all of the stats you've done tonight. Lachlan, as we draw to the end, how did you think tonight's gone?
I mean, Freddie's an absolute rock star. We know that. We've
agree.
Confirmed that. No, but honestly, a federal election, right? I love my time in that virtual data studio, and I think he's been loving it.
Yeah.
Just as much.
In his element, I'd say.
Yeah, but there we go. You had your first TV story. Lots of live crosses tonight.
Yes.
Yeah, we've had a lot going on,
Melbourne,
really.
Yeah, we've had live interviews in the studio. I've quite enjoyed those ones. Yeah, and we've heard from issues, like a wide range of issues, haven't we? Environment, transport, everything that matters to us Victorians.
Absolutely, Victorians. Look, I've moved here from Queensland, and definitely something I've learned very, very quickly is Victorians definitely are vocal about what they care about. Vocal. Queensland, we're relaxed, we're laid back.
Yeah, true. We've seen that through Ashland's segment on the streets and everything like that as well.
Absolutely, and as well, can't forget the Kerr, Scott and Jordan for coming in and talking about what they're doing, what they're hoping for, their dreams, what they're advocating for, but it has been great. Let's take them out with some results. The ABC have called some seats, and we're gonna copy the homework. It's fine. Who's winning? Who's winning?
On the screen, I can definitely see the Australian Labor Party is in the lead.
Absolutely, 26 seats declared for the Labor Party. We've got the Liberals trailing on 11, and then again that very dynamic. That very, it's going to probably give the next government, even if they are a majority, a bit of a challenge.
Yeah,
that expanding crossbench. I mean, we were talking about the independents earlier. I think that's kind of been one of the themes of this election.
True. I think independents, but also some of the other minor parties. I saw a lot of candidates running for some minor parties as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the Angry Victorians Party, the Freedom Party, who we heard from earlier. It feels like perhaps it's not quite just a wholesale shift from maybe left to right, but after the last few years, a shift from left to all kinds of alternatives.
Yeah, like that two-party preferential voting, how long will that last, with this increase in others?
Absolutely. So we'll see, can Labor hang on to a majority government? Right now, it's looking likely, but that is where we will leave it. 28, they've just called more while we were talking, 28 seats for Labor, 10 for the Liberals, 8 for other candidates. That is where we will leave you. It's looking likely that we will see a Labor government, whether that's a minority or majority. Well, you'll have to go somewhere else to find out. I know SYN Radio is broadcasting Represent on air covering the election. Maybe chuck on the radio, have a listen to the Represent team. They're right upstairs from us, so we'll go say hi after we're done.
For sure.
That wraps up our election coverage. A huge thank you to all of the RMITV crew and executive producers for making this broadcast possible. About a month ago, they rang me. I was in Brisbane.
Yeah.
They were like, let's make it happen, and I'm so glad they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, seriously, really, really appreciate everyone in the room back there.
And thank you to the RMIT Journalism Society and everyone who got involved. And that includes Freddie in the studio, all of our live reporters out in the field at the moment, all of our journos behind the scenes, getting interviews, making phone calls, everything like that. And you, Lachlan, as well, for making it happen.
Love it. No, we've had our great reporter, Lily, here tonight. As our favourite lecturer, Josie Vine, would say. Any questions? Any worries? Any comments? No.
Juicy bits of gossip?
Juicy bits of gossip? No. Let's knock off early. We'll head off. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next election.
Thank you.